Right, okay, Brent, you go off. You lead the way.
Fantastic. Hi, Rob. First chance we've had to chat properly since the great news about you getting your gong, first of all, from the Palace. How did that feel when you got the letter?
Well, as I said, it felt. I'm not going to repeat. Kind of, it felt a bit odd to start with, and obviously, there was a little bit of just checking email addresses and who'd sent it, and before you, like anything in the modern day, you don't just download things because they turn up. And then obviously, when we downloaded the letter and read it, it was obviously a very nice surprise. One I feel very honoured by, and as I said before, one that is clearly I feel I've been part of a fantastic journey, and as great as it is for me to have an individual recognition, I also am very aware that it's been a lot of hard work by a lot of people and players to achieve success. Nice things happen. We talk about that a lot for the players. And I've been fortunate enough to get some recognition this time around.
Fantastic. Team news wise, first of all, how's the squad looking? Obviously, Stuart Hogg had a bit of an injury last time out. How's he going to be, and how's the team looking COVID test wise as well?
Most people are progressing, and progressing pretty quickly. So neither his hamstring, Cordero's also Facu Cordero's also got a hamstring, so he couldn't be involved last week either. They're progressing well. They're close to, they've been on the pitch running, so they're relatively close. Whether this week is a little too early for them, kind of time will tell. We have had some positive tests, but that's as far as I can say on that. Really, that's had a slight impact on the availability of players, but not huge. And we've selected a team that looks very good. We are probably one of the teams who, when we do have anything in the camp, kind of COVID-wise, always try and organise a second round of testing. So we'll do that either tomorrow or Friday. That will then ensure that anything that is lingering or hasn't been picked up won't wait until next Monday, because we're kind of one of these clubs who do feel a responsibility to try and get on top of anything very, very quickly, and certainly not risk players going onto the field against opposition if there's any doubt about where they might be. So we're certainly going to have another round of testing later this week, just to ensure that nobody's slipped through the net, nobody's developed, and nobody's become viral later in the week. And that will just ensure that when we take the field, we can go with 100% confidence. We're not risking transmitting anything to Bristol.
So the way I hear you talking there, you're confident that the game will go ahead and that you won't have a situation where later in the week you may have to kind of pull a plug.
It's like anything, Brent. At this stage, I'm very confident, but experience has told me that every time I've said I'm confident about where the COVID scenario is within club rugby, something turns around and the opposite happens. So at this stage, we've done everything correctly as we have done before. We've only had one what you'd call scenario that causes any problems. So we know how to deal with things, and we know we're pretty good. So there's no reason to say we should have any problems, but we're doing it as a precaution.
One person I want to ask about we've not seen a lot of lately is Alex Cuthbert. I was wondering, is he fit? Is he still injured? What's the score with Alex?
Alex had a quite a significant muscle tear, and that we just had to give him proper time. People be aware he's kind of rolled from an injury to an injury for a lot of the time he's been here, and so obviously, Alex will play tomorrow. That's the kind of guy he is, and probably it's been the reason why he's tended to pick up injuries, or injuries have become sustained worse injuries, is because he's quite a tough cookie. He wants to be on the field, and he gets on with things, and sometimes maybe hasn't quite reported little bits and pieces. So we're being maybe a little bit overly cautious with him, just taking our time. But he's one of these guys who'll be around in the foreseeable future. But it's just one of those things. Players pick up injuries, and you've got to condition them through it and get them 100% fit to play again. So there's no other issues with him other than there's been an injury issue.
Fair enough. Obviously frustrating though for a player who came in a few years ago and really has played hardly as many games compared to what you would have thought he would have played.
Yeah, but it's one of those things. And the one thing that everybody here at the club's very positive about is he's one of the hardest working rehab people we've had. The conditioners and the physios can't talk highly about how professional he is and how hard he works to get himself right. That's all you can ask of a player. You can't ask players not to get injured. That's not how it works. All you can do is ask them to give every opportunity to get back on the field when they can and be ready to play, and he does that every single time.
Obviously, this week, a lot of talk about the Lions tour, whether it will go to South Africa or whether it will come to the United Kingdom. What are your thoughts on what should happen with the Lions tour?
I think the big problem with the Lions tours is just the logistics of how early things have to be organised. There is a reality now around vaccines and what certainly what we're being told in the UK, that you would think the distance off that it is that there's certainly the potential for, certainly in this country, and you'd like to think that means overseas as well, for us to be well ahead of the virus around vaccinations. So I don't really want to make a comment on anything else because I don't know the logistics involved, the timescales involved. It does feel for me like a little way off to be making early calls, but because I'm not involved in the logistics of it, it's not for me to say. I don't know whether a deadline's coming up in the next week or two around stadium use, travel, all the kinds of massive logistical things, ticket sales, everything that's going to go on. I can understand if South Africa genuinely feel that they won't have supporters in grounds by the time the Lions tour starts, why they want to delay it. Of course, I can understand the reasonings behind it, but that's not for me. That's not for me to say. I don't know what the state of the world is going to be in a few months' time.
From kind of a player welfare type of situation, though, it must be I would have thought as a coach would rather your players stayed in the UK area or Ireland rather than trekking halfway across the world.
Well, I mean, for obvious reasons, you'd rather that would be the case, even if there was nothing, even if there was no COVID, because obviously player welfare, you want them, the closer you are, the better you can look after them. But the reality is, if we're on top of the COVID situation across the world, it's no more dangerous than them going on holiday, which they would do every summer. So that part of it, I'm not overly concerned. It's either going to be a danger or it's not. If it's still a dangerous environment, then it's dangerous, and yes, you'd have concern. If it's not a dangerous environment, it's not a dangerous environment, and it's a rugby environment, and they should be allowed to go and get on with it. I think some of these questions asking us where rugby's going to be in 6 months' time, they're just put your finger in the air and see what happens, aren't they? Because none of us know. I think the reality of where we are kind of at the moment is things change day by day at the moment, don't they? Lockdowns change day by day, the rules change day by day. We don't know where we're going to be in a month's time, let alone 6 months. So I think trying to make a lot of comment on what should be happening around the Lions at this stage for a club coach is almost an impossible scenario to even make on what it'll be like.
Other than obviously wanting as many of your players picked as possible for some recognition, I suppose.
I mean, we want our players, as I said earlier on, we want our players to get the recognition they deserve if they're playing well, and then they play well internationally. You want them to achieve every accolade they can. And if that means, I don't want to say a number, but if it means several of our lads going on a British Lions tour, that would be great for them.
Could you foresee a situation where maybe players like the Simmons brothers, who aren't getting England recognition at the moment, might get picked by a different Lions coach?
Potentially. I mean, again, I always say it's not for me to pick a Lions team or an England team. The coaches and the managers involved, they know how they want to play. They know the group they want to take. I can 100% see that happening because it's happened before. And it's happened before on successful Lions tours. But as I've said before, to do that, the players have to make the case for themselves, which means playing well, playing consistently, and they need to be seen playing in high-profile games. So, as an example, if the Simmons boys don't get picked to play international rugby, they need to be playing in big knockout games. That means we need to strive to get to semi-finals and finals of competitions to give them that showcase. And if they do that, there's every possibility of them being involved in those kind of games.
Well, just looking ahead to this weekend, then obviously the Wasps' last defeat at the weekend just gone. Have you guys got over it, so to speak, looking ahead to this week?
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because all the questions I've had about the game since is almost like there's an element of shock about it, or whatever. And as I said afterwards, we were never going to go. Well, I mean, I suppose you can theoretically go full seasons without losing, but there's a reality to a scenario, and you don't have to be very far off to lose to teams in the Premiership. That's why the Premiership is such a good competition, because it's massively competitive. And if a team are good on the day and another team a bit off, things tend to go that way. And that's a little bit what happened to us. Getting over it is no different to what we've always done. There's been plenty of losses in the time I've been involved in the Premiership, and we lost last season and won a double. You get over it by getting in, looking at doing a review, doing a preview, doing your individual reviews with the players, talking things through with them. getting back onto the training field and working hard to get better. And we've done exactly that.
And finally, from me, obviously, playing a side like Bristol, who are obviously top of the league alongside you now, is that a game you want after a defeat, playing a well-informed side, or do you prefer would you have preferred a team that perhaps had been coming off the back of a couple of defeats?
I don't kind of look at one or the other, to be honest with you. We just kind of get on with it and we get ready for the next team, and that's what we do. We know, it's whether it's Bristol or whether it was anybody else. We see every team as a threat and every team as a challenge, and we get on and prepare for that side, and we aim to do the best we can on the day. I think it's a great challenge playing Bristol. I think they're one of the teams that everyone wants to watch. They're an exciting side, local derby. There's a lot of reasons for us to want to perform in the game, and that's what we have to do. We have to take all the reasons there are for us to perform and lay them out on the field. They're, as you say, they're one of our closest rivals in a lot of ways. They're our nearest neighbour in the Premiership, but they're also one of the teams that was up in and around the top 4 last season, and we should see them as a real rival for what we want to achieve. So, if you say do all those things, add a little bit of something to the game, of course they do. But whether we'd want them more or less than anybody else, I don't think it makes a lot of difference. I think you get on with things and you prepare, and you have the same nerves and the same anxiety, whatever it is, or the same excitement every single week. And that's what the Premiership's so good at.
Super. Thanks very much. That's all I need. I'll let somebody else have a go.
Okay.
Hi, Rob. Will here. How's it going?
All good, thanks, Will. Happy New Year.
You too. Thank you. I appreciate you're in the middle of a Premiership week, but you would have seen there's a fair bit of chat from the French regarding Europe and them saying that they quite like to can the Champions Cup because of the COVID situation and cross-border contaminations and things like that. A few of their owners have been quite vocal on that subject. What would you make of that?
I'll be honest with you, Will, I hadn't seen that far. I saw obviously that there was one French club talking about potentially pulling out, but then I'd also saw the statement from EPCR that said they hadn't had any communications about clubs contacting them. So at this stage, that's very much how I'm reading it. I mean, I didn't realize. So there's more clubs talking about it, is there?
Yeah. So Montpellier owner Altrad has said this morning that the competition should be scrapped, and basically the Premiership, top 14, Pro 14 should just concentrate on finishing their leagues.
Listen, it's a little bit like I was saying just now about asking about the Lions. You can't really communicate. You can't really talk for anybody else. For ourselves, we feel we're kind of dealing with the scenario pretty well. Obviously, we're very keen to play in competitions. That's why we're here. Do I understand why people have their concerns and their worries and their doubts about it? 100%, because there's a reason we're in the scenario we're in, and that should give a concern, shouldn't it? So I think everyone's entitled to their opinion about it. Do I understand an opinion that says, is it difficult to complete the competition? 100% I do. But it's a little bit like some of these decisions. They're decisions beyond that I can make. They're decisions for EPCR and the stakeholders in the game to make. For us, we've got to kind of get on, and as we're being cleared as professional sport to carry on in the current situation. That's kind of what we have to do. We have to take responsibility for our own actions and how we behave and things we do, and work from there, really. And at the moment, I think that's all we can do, because there can be a lot of comment around what you want to do week by week, game by game, kind of month by month. And as I said before, we're in such a climate of change at the moment. I think the most important thing is to just kind of focus on yourself and what you're doing and how you try and get. I know it sounds a bit. I think every rugby club almost needs to get itself through things a little bit, because the only thing you're in control of around COVID is the practices you have in place. You can't. It's an impossible scenario to try and do it for anybody else. And so that's really the only comment I can make. And I'm sorry about that. I don't really have a comment on whether the game should go ahead. At the moment, we feel it would be safer to lose to come here and play next week because of the practices that are here and are in place. But at the same time, it's not for me to tell Toulouse that they should feel comfortable, is it? That's got to be their decision.
Just on that point that you made about clubs getting themselves through, what is the reality of a third lockdown for the Chiefs? Obviously, you can play your Premiership games and hopefully European Cup games, but in terms of the business, I mean, this time, well, March last year, we were saying, oh, by next year, hopefully we'll have fans back. And that's clearly not going to be the case. So businesses are going to have to suffer. So what's the reality of it on the ground for you guys?
I think there's two ways of looking at this now. We just about started to get crowds back, didn't we? And then the scenarios happen this here now. But then there is that, as I know a lot of people are saying now, there is kind of that light at the end of the tunnel that with the vaccination rollout, that there is some positivity ahead, that there is a way out, that we're not sitting here going, well, we're not going to have a crowd for 6 months. I think most people are now sitting here and going, well, with the scale of the vaccination program being talked about, if that many million vulnerable and elderly people, the people worst affected by the virus, are going to be vaccinated within the next 6 weeks, then for obvious reasons, you start to see a way forward that restrictions can start to be opened up, because the fact that the virus killing people, the plain fact of it, will stop, won't it? Because that's what the vaccination process is for. I think once we get to that stage, and that's what obviously we're all hoping for happens as quickly as possible, then there is a way forward. So the element of taking it now, while it might be bad, but getting on with things, I think is acceptable to a lot of clubs. We can see a way out, and we just have to, as I say, help everybody find the way out as well as we can.
Hi, Rob. Focusing on Bristol a little bit, the fact that they probably do consider themselves a contender this season, does it want you to put down a bit more of a marker? I know you put out a chain side against Wasps, who were the finalists last year, but does it make you want to put a marker down against those type of contender sides?
Yeah, well, I think we sport with it if there weren't rivalries and there weren't people looking at each other and going, this is a big game. So Exeter against Bristol, if you look at the last couple of seasons and last season in particular, is a big game, isn't it? And I think both teams will certainly wanting to make some kind of a statement. But the biggest statement we probably both want to make is to show that we can beat each other. That's the reality, isn't it? You want to show that, which is why the Wasps win last week was a big win for them. The last game they played against us, they lost in the final. They'd be wanting to put down a marker that they could beat Exeter Chiefs, and they did that very well. For us, 100%, we want to put down a marker that we can beat Bristol here at Sandy Park. Interestingly enough, they came to Sandy Park last year and beat us here early in the season, but then we went to their place and beat them. So these things, they have that extra little bit of a bit of spice, and I'd be a lie if I didn't say there was not some markers we wanted to put down there. Of course we do, but that's what will make it a really good game of rugby. The conditions look pretty good. We've had a dry week here, which has certainly helped the surface. It's predicted to be dry but cold, and so there's no reason why it shouldn't be a good game of rugby, and hopefully that's what it will become.
I know you'll get a better look at them at the weekend, but do you feel that they've progressed as a club in the last since you played them off?
Well, 100%. I mean, the time in the Premiership. I've got to be careful I say this, because some people will disagree, because you see clubs going up and down the table. I always felt that it was time in the Premiership that helped us more than anything else. So actually, the single most important thing for us to become a better team, initially in our first kind of year or two in the Premiership, was staying there, and not just staying there, but staying there with a confidence relatively early in the season that you weren't going to be relegated. Because actually, I think progress, the thing that stilts you progressing as a team more than anything else, is that looking over your shoulder, worrying about where the next results coming, where the next points are coming. And what Bristol have managed to do very well is remove those doubts quite quickly, and that's what allows you to progress quickly, because you then develop your game, you can develop things without that kind of threat and fear. And I think that's the scenario Bristol found themselves in very quickly when they got back into the Premiership, and that's allowing them to develop and work on aspects of their game. And as you can see, they're a team that can score points very quickly if you get things wrong. But also, Newcastle showed they've got some weaknesses that you can exploit if you play well. So, and Wasps showed the same with us. We've hardly conceded any points really for 4 games. That's been the best thing about us has been our defence. And then Wasps turn around and score 5 tries. So those are the challenges we've all got to face. And that's what I'm saying. It should make it an interesting game, because Bristol can score, but they can concede. We can score. That's been a big factor for our success. And all of a sudden, we've showed that we can concede as well. So it makes it an interesting challenge.
Have you managed to get the rest for your international players mainly out the way now?
A fair bit of it done, but it's not completed. We actually took the decision to rest our non-EPS players as well for a decent bit of time. So we didn't have to do that, but we kind of felt that was the right thing to do because they joined up with their international squads at the same time as the England lads. We've got most of it through. Obviously, we've still got a week running for some guys, but we're getting through it. It's like anything. It's another challenge that this season's thrown up. A lot more clashes with Six Nations games coming up soon. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be an interesting and a good challenge for a lot of rugby clubs. I'm kind of quite looking forward to it a little bit, like looking forward to it with my hands behind my eyes type thing, seeing what will happen. But I think you've got to take the approach that you'll become a better, stronger squad through the exposure that these things will happen. I think an over-reliance just on, say 25, 28 players, I'm not sure if that actually really develops you over an extended period when you, especially in a period where there's no championship rugby and younger players are not getting anything else. Like we've got quite a large contingent of our young players are based at Exeter University or in Exeter University. They're not getting even any university rugby. And I think that development stage, without them getting literally your opportunity to develop now and play is in the Premiership game. And the one thing this season is going to give is going to make that happen, especially this Six Nations period. So you've got to try and look at it positive, and you've got to try and look at it as a tool to keep getting better and stronger.
Yeah, just so I understand properly, so the Scottish guys, they're going to get the 2 weeks the same as the England guys?
Well, everybody's doing it on a individual basis. So some guys have asked for a week, some guys have asked for 2 weeks, some guys have had 10 days, some guys have asked for a period, a shorter period break and then an extended weekend. So everyone's kind of done things differently. Aren't we funny? I have actually had players come in and go, can I cut my break short because I'm getting bored? Because there is reality that they can't go on holiday. There's not a lot of places they can go. There's not a lot of things they can do with their wives or girlfriends or families. And so some of them are literally, it's either sit at home or come in and train and play a game of rugby, and they're rugby players and the majority of them want to play. So, we've actually got guys back quicker than we were anticipating because some of them have phoned me this week and said they want to get on with things and play, which is great from a coaching perspective. And obviously anybody who's probably not had time now, we'll probably reward with a bit of an extended summer break when hopefully they can start doing things again.
I know you touched on injuries a little bit, but it's been a while since we heard about Jack Knowles' progress. How's he getting along?
Okay, a serious injury, quite an operation. I think timescales, I don't want to be overly positive, but I think you're probably looking 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. So time flies and time goes by incredibly quickly. Interesting enough, I think a lot of our guys who've had operations or tidy ups or even recently got injured, there's that period where we could get them back in a bit of a block, which seems to be about around that period, that kind of 4 to 8 to 10 weeks. There's a good block of injured players who'll be returning then. So as I said, time will go by quickly till then. But at the moment, we've got a strong squad anyway, and we'll be getting on things and certainly aiming to win this weekend and win going forward.
Yeah, and just finally for me, just Yanis Kirsten, what was it? It was a face injury that he's picked up, isn't it?
Unfortunately, Yanis he came off obviously for the HIA, and when he came off, we obviously realised that there was something more going on. So when he went in for X-rays, he's got a very small fracture around his eye socket. I won't tell you the exact details of it all, but which obviously means he had a small operation. He's back in. He came back in and around. He's okay, but now he's got to just go through his period of rehab, which initially is, anybody who knows about kind of things around your facial fracture stuff, initially means you've got to rest for a period because any pressure build up is what causes you issues again. So at the moment he's just resting and recuperating, and then he'll start a progression of return to play over, like I say, that next 5-6 week period.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Good luck for the weekend.
Hi, Rob. It's David from the Eye. Happy New Year and congratulations on the OBE for starters. I was just wondering, all we keep hearing about is not enough ambulances, hospitals being clogged up. Overall, do you think it's worth professional sport as a whole, not just rugby, being a potential, addition to those queues and ambulance usage?
Before I answer this, David, can I ask you why you're asking me?
Why am I asking it?
It's interesting because last week you asked me a question on BBC Sports personality.
Yeah.
I saw the headline you put out that I'd ridiculed BBC Sports personality.
I don't write the headlines, but
control of it.
because I think it's an issue of the day, isn't it? It's a big issue, and Well, I'm asking the question in context of professional sport, not just rugby. Just whether there's an argument that professional sport should be continuing at all.
One of the biggest
Go on.
headline's going to go with it.
I have no idea. Well, depends what the answer is.
I won't answer the question then.
Well, I think it's an important view on what you feel, as a big player in the sport, what you feel.
Yeah, but I'm not going to answer a question that I don't know how it's going to be reported.
What's going to be reported straight?
Because it's a question that is a relatively emotional. I don't know how it's going to be reported. I'm not going to answer it.
Okay,
Rob,
fair enough.
Can I jump in and just ask, I suppose, what your reaction was when you found out that the government wasn't going to call a halt to professional sport? There must have been an element of relief, but I suppose you're not complacent that it will last forever.
No, I'll be honest with you. I think my realization of why it was, and this is, I think, the bigger picture thing that perhaps I'd like to think has been taken into appreciation. If you do look at professional sport, how it runs, how we run our squad, how we manage things, the level of things that are in place, what I would like to think is the reason that professional sport's going ahead is because the actual threat of COVID within our group then becoming an issue either for the NHS or the wider populace. I think the risk is so small that I would think that is why it's been allowed to continue. So if you think this would what I would like to think is if you think we're tested at least once or twice a week. Ourselves now in the last kind of month we've tested twice a week, 2 or 3 times, so at least once a week. So you're not going to have a scenario where it's whatever, even if one of our players pick it up, they're going to go undetected, and so be in a scenario where they're going to be potential risks to lots of other people, because also we're living in an environment where they actually understand they've got to stay relatively shielded when they leave the club anyway, because they don't want to be picking it up, because they don't want to not play games of rugby. So we pick anything up that happens relatively quickly, either within a week or sometimes 2 or 3 days. That then means that we can get them into isolation very quickly, and the people they live with or their contacts. And so actually we're almost in control of any spread within a week. I mean, the scenario that I can probably highlight for us, we had numerous cases picked up in one test, but within a week, either everyone was isolated or had been retested twice. And in that time, we picked up 2 more cases, and then our next round of testing was completely negative. So either everyone was in isolation, or we'd stop the spread within the group here. So I would like to think the reason that professional sport's been allowed to go on is for that reason, that it's deemed to be, in the bigger picture, the current situation, relatively safe. And I've got to say relatively safe, because nothing can be, it's almost impossible to say it's 100% safe, relatively safe compared to the general populace who are out and about, not being tested unless they develop symptoms, etc. So that's why I'd like to think it works. And I think that when you put it down like that and go through the points, it does seem a relatively sensible approach.
Can I just come in? Sorry, can I just ask a different question? There's a lot of talk of the ring fencing, possibly for 1 year, 2 years, and some kind of announcement imminent. A, have you heard that? And B, is that something you'd be looking for, that you're in favour of?
I haven't heard of any announcement or how quickly it might happen. Am I aware discussions are taking place? Yes, because I think, as you see, there's plenty of chat going on about it. If you want to ask me, do I support it? And I've answered this question loads and loads of times. I can't sit here and go, I support no promotion into the Premiership, because we fought for it for so long, and it was part of everything we wanted to become, and we managed to get there, and we are now enjoying the fruits of that hard work. So for me to stand here now and say, no, this is it should all get shut up shop, that would be, I just couldn't do that and be honest with myself, okay? But the flip side is, do I understand why other people would say we need to do this, because otherwise financially we might be struggling in the future? I 100% understand that. And I think I'd be very naive and rather stupid to say I don't understand that there are some clubs who are starting to look around and question their future. And if ring fencing is a way for them to feel they feel more secure in what they've got and what their investment is in the ground, I can 100% understand the argument, because the financial arguments and security arguments are there. They're not there. They're real and they're true. Does that mean that sport should not have something beyond that? Well, it probably should. And that's not me sitting here saying whatever happens, we've got to maintain promotion and relegation in its current form. But I 100% think we as Exeter Rugby Club have got to support some process of a rugby club being able to get promoted in some way. It was tough for us to get promoted, whatever any people think. There was loads of hoops we had to jump through around the very basic minimum operator standards you have to have in place. There isn't many clubs could get that in place anyway, as the current rules stand. So it's not me asking for something different, but I certainly want there to be maintained some way that a club with ambition and the drive to actually put things in place, as we had to do, would be able to achieve promotion at some stage.
Okay, thanks.
Rob, could I just ask one extra question? I know that you were saying that you see the rationale behind professional sport continuing. With the rise in positive cases in the Premier League, for example, and we know that EFL clubs are being tested, has this impacted rugby? Are you strengthening your protocols to make sure that professional sport can continue?
You'll probably see something come out relatively quickly, because I believe it's being actually debated and discussed today on a extent, almost, how should I say this? Not hardening of the rules, a little bit more. I'm trying to work out. Well, I'll tell you the easiest way for me to explain it. I don't know if any of you are aware, you probably are, as we moved into training, so out of lockdown where players were at home to a start of training, we were given sets of operating standards that initially were very, how would you say, I suppose very strict, very severe. So players could only come and train outside or in very small groups in the gym. Initially, everything had to be done with social distancing, etc. And those rules were slowly eased as we moved back towards getting closer to rugby. So larger groups could train together, could start spending more time in the gym, etc. And what we're going to do is, it's being debated as to whether some of those rules need to be re-added at some aspects of training, preparing. So that's an ongoing process of re-looking at everything that's in place in the minimum operating standards and assessing as whether anything needs adding, taking, changing to, as you say, in the new environment we're in, just adapt things for this period.
Do you think that they should be strengthened in light of what's happening around the country?
The trouble is, if I say no, that sounds flippant, but the restrictions that there are so stringent anyway. And as I said, you get on top of things so quickly anyhow. The fact, I suppose I could say, the fact that there's even any one COVID case says yes, but the problem is, because the rugby club itself is probably the safest place during the week that the players are, because the things that they're in place already. But what you can't allow for is what happens outside. So it's impossible for me to say that a strengthening of the rules within the club environment would stop more COVID outbreaks, because none of us are complete control of what you do once you leave the rugby club. Because if someone, unless we completely isolate every single player, they don't go home, they don't go back to their family, they don't go and see their children. Because the reality is, even in lockdown now, you still have to go shopping when you need to go shopping. There is still risk everywhere. So I think a revitalisation, a refocus on everything that's happening around professional sport is good. But for me to say that changing the rules will make an improvement, I don't think anybody can say that, because we just don't know, do we?
Rob, it's Alex. Morning. How challenging has it been to keep the players and coaching staff motivated and focused in the face of so much uncertainty? You look at the Toulouse verdict the other week, that must have been incredibly deflating for everyone to have that kind of put on your season.
I don't think so, because I think we're all grown-ups, and we're all aware that the world is a different place at the moment. And I think I always like to think that we're kind of one of these clubs you go, right, we're aware of the scenario, we're aware of the rules, we know what will happen, and you get on with it, and you take it on the chin if this thing happens. It happened to us. I can't deny. We had a COVID outbreak in the club that was big enough for that fixture not to go ahead against Toulouse, and we had to deal with it. That's what we're going to have to do. That's what every rugby club's going to have to do at the moment. And sometimes it'll, as you say, it'll be tough. But at the end of the day, why was it tough? It was tough because of the success we had last year. And I think that's why you've got to try and get it into reality. It's in the bigger picture. If this season is a battle to get through, and we get through it okay and unscathed in a way, and when I say unscathed, I mean with no health issues amongst the people we know and in the club, you've done a pretty good job. And anything you can get out of it positively on the rugby field is more than a bonus, really. And I think that's how you've just got to approach it. We're not sitting here feeling deflated about the fact that we couldn't play Toulouse. I talk to lads all the time. We should just feel over the moon that we're getting on with our lives and our jobs to any extent. Because we're very fortunate. We're very fortunate to be able to do what we're doing. We're not isolated at home. We get to get up in the morning and get into a rugby club and train and see people and get on with things. So we're actually more fortunate. I'd like to think we haven't had any deflation from it. I think we've had some annoyance probably because we wanted to get on with it. But I wouldn't say it's been deflation or feeling sorry for ourselves. I think when I walk around the lads and I see them talk and I see them train, I think they feel very, very good about themselves and what they want to still achieve this year.
Conversely, then, have you been surprised and heartened by how robust they've managed to remain in terms of their spirit and their competitive spirit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think if you looked at what we achieved last season during a difficult scenario, that showed we had a lot about us in very tough and emotional times. I think the way we started the season has shown that. I think we started the season very well. Yes, we've had a bit of a blip last week, but I think the one thing that a successful start or a period of success always has blips. Our job is to make sure it's just a blip and it's not anything bigger. And we focused a lot on that this week, and we just focused completely on ourselves and what we want to achieve and what's important to us. And it's just about getting on with things, isn't it? It's not about feeling sorry for yourself. That's not what good sporting teams do. Good sporting teams get up and get on with things, take the knocks and get on with it.
Was there ever a doubt in your mind that the players and staff would front up as they have this season after winning the double? They wouldn't just drop off a bit?
I think in any sport, that's always the question you ask yourself, isn't it? As the manager or boss or whatever, is that, is there going to be an emotional flat now at some stage? And in some ways, I wonder if that happened a little bit last week, because I think there was a reality it might have happened at some stage. But when we started the season, as I said, I've been very impressed with the lads, how they've stayed in shape, how hard they've worked, their attitude to each other, their attitude to getting on with things and dealing with difficult circumstances. And I've got no reason to doubt that won't continue. It is a Wasps game of worry. Well, it is a little bit because it happened. And probably the bigger worry is that more on some individual performances more than the collective team performance. But that happens. And I think sometimes in a stronger team, you can have the odd individual poor performance or not quite a good performance and you get carried through. That didn't quite happen at the weekend. The team couldn't carry through the individual errors we made or the individual mistakes. So we just got to front up to that and change it this week. But that's what makes sports exciting, isn't it? It's the losing that makes winning so good, isn't it? That's the reality, and that's what we've got to decide to enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Right, thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Bye.